There's a lot of noise in the crypto sphere and very little signal. We're here to amplify that signal. My name is Nicholas Merton, and you're listening to The AMP, powered by Digivox. Alrighty, everyone. So in today's episode of The AMP, I'm sitting down with Mayor Scott Conger, who is the mayor of Jackson, Tennessee. And he's not only the mayor of Jackson, Tennessee, but has been avidly working, like many mayors such as Francis Suarez, as well as Scott Adams, to be a pioneer in the cryptocurrency space, pushing adoption of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies alike in every form that he can as mayor. So, Scott, I want to say thank you for making the time, man. It's a pleasure to have you on. I've been tracking your story for a while on Twitter, seeing all the different types of initiatives you've been doing, and you've been really leading forward, I think, as an example on a mayor level to be able to scale out cryptocurrency. So thank you for making the time. I know you keep busy.
No, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, man. So I want to go ahead and kick things off here, just to first get a little bit of backstory around you and stuff, because my understanding is you've kind of been in government for some time and stuff in Jackson. You have a long history there growing up. And I wanted to get a little bit of backstory before we dive into what got you into crypto.
Yeah, so family's been in Jackson. Gosh, my family's been here almost 200 years. Came about 10 years after our city was founded, which we're celebrating our bicentennial this year. My family's been a part of politics in Jackson for a while. Great-great-great-grandfather, mayor back in the 1800s. Grandfather was mayor from 1967 to 1989. And then I got involved in politics in 2011. The right age of 27, got elected to the city council, served almost 2 terms, moved out of the district when my wife and I were having our second child, because you have to live where you serve, and our house was not big enough to hold 4 of us. And so that gave me the opportunity to really analyze what we wanted from our family, and our family wanted to make sure our kids had a place that they wanted to call home in Jackson when they grew up. And so my wife and I thought it was an opportune time for me to run for mayor and be a part of that foundational creation for Jackson of tomorrow, and one that our kids, when they're grown, will want to stay in.
Very cool, man. I originally grew up in Virginia, so I always loved coming down to Tennessee. And I mean, whether again going through Nashville, through Jackson, through Knoxville, and there's so many awesome, great areas in the state. And I'm really curious, overall, you've been going through and serving in politics for some time, Scott. And I'm curious to hear, I think with everyone, they kind of have that pivotal moment when crypto just kind of captures them and they get dragged down the rabbit hole to learn more and more about it. So I'm curious to hear, with your position that you're in and stuff, what really got you into crypto, and what kind of was the initial sign that you saw that there was some value in this sector?
Well, I've heard about Bitcoin for a while, and just really didn't know much about it, how to get into it or anything like that. And the pandemic does strange things to people. You get a lot of time. You're not going to events, and especially in my role, and you're scrolling through social media and reading a lot, and started seeing about Bitcoin and crypto, and just the immediate, almost it seems like, drastic appreciation through the pandemic and people interested, and so it got me interested personally. And then a friend of mine here locally, kind of tongue-in-cheek, tweeted at me and on one of Mayor Suarez's tweets about Bitcoin, and kind of joked back and forth, and that opened the conversation for Mayor Suarez about watching what he was doing. And then Jackson is in between Memphis and Nashville and West Tennessee, so we're not quite Miami. We're a town of 68,000 in West Tennessee, and I thought, gosh, Miami is Miami, right? And they're doing things because they have the ability to draw people in, and looking at that 21st century economy. And so I got to thinking, why not Jackson? We were the first city in the state to have gig fiber internet to the home. Didn't tell anyone at the time, and so, but we had it, and we do have it. We're still cutting edge when it comes to our internet service, our capability, and so why not talk about those things that go along with that 21st century economy, those new jobs, the tech world, but also looking at the way that the government has continuously printed out money over the last 2.5 years, the depreciation of the dollar through inflation, and what that looks like. And then so I started looking at how can the city get involved. And I think for me that the light bulb moment was having lunch with a friend of mine, Aaron, and has a talking about buying fencing because he has a fencing company, and this was early 2021. He said, if I look at the cost of lumber through dollars, U.S. dollars, lumber's way more expensive than it was in 2020. But I look at the cost of lumber through the eyes of SATs, it's actually cheaper. And so it really got me thinking, how can we position ourselves as municipalities, individuals, against that inflation hedge going forward, and how can we start preparing now for that?
Interesting that you brought that up, Scott, about like kind of viewing commodities and dividing it, or at least viewing it in the price terms of Sats or Bitcoin, effectively. Because one thing that we picked up when we were chatting with Mayor Suarez before is this point that I think a lot of people don't understand. When you're in a position as like a mayor of a city or town, you have to balance your budget. It's very different than the federal government. And I see this consistent tone where mayors are like, yeah, the federal government, the central banks of the United States, like the Federal Reserve, have gotten way out of control when it comes to monetary policy and fiscal spending. And mayors working on a localized level, they not only understand their community much deeper, so they obviously want to make much more dramatic investment and impact on people's lives than someone who's working at the federal level. But on top of that as well, you have that mindset of fiscal responsibility. And to do that, you've got to constantly stay innovative, working on a localized level. So I really can appreciate and understand that case, that position you were in, not only with just crypto, but as you mentioned, technological innovation. And I want to kind of dive in a little bit to that because, for Jackson, you have a big focus of doing pretty much anything you can to drive Bitcoin and crypto into the space. So I know one of them, which is kind of relevant to us, is getting paid in crypto in the local area. But I wanted to hear as well maybe like the full scope of what you guys are looking to do to bring Bitcoin and crypto to the space.
Yeah, so it started out for me thinking, what can we do? Because you're right, I mean, budgeting for us is paramount. We've been fortunate in the last couple of years. We've been very conservative in how we've budgeted. Since I took office in July of 2019, there really hasn't been a normal, like, call it a budget year because we've had COVID and everything that goes along with it. And so, but we've been fortunate. We've planned very well. We've had some surpluses, and so to put that money back in. But we're still at the point, like many other local governments, we're having to ask the or question. Are we going to pave streets? Are we going to do sidewalks? Or are we going to invest in parks? How are we going to prioritize our spending? And so, my first thought was, let's get to that 15, 20 years down the road, and we have some space up here in City Hall that hasn't been used since the city hall was built. And I thought, man, I'll spend a little money here and get some miners, put it down there, turn it on in the off-peak hours, let it run, balance our energy usage out with our energy authority, and then just not even worry about it. Just let it mine, and then we get to a point 15, 20 years down the road, we can go, let's get to the and conversation. Let's do the streets and the sidewalks and the parks and the capital investments. And so reached out to the state comptroller's office, said, hey, this is what I want to do. Can I do it? And they politely said, no, you can't. There's certain things that you can't invest in, you can't hold on your balance sheet, and crypto and Bitcoin is not one of them. So, okay. And so how do we continue the conversation and get people bought in and get people understanding what this process is, and still continue to move forward with the limits that we have. And so that is, since we can't pay employees, we talked about accepting property taxes through a third-party system. But the reality of it now, I mean, we want to educate people to hold right now, not to spend it because of the short-term volatility, and massive Jobson hasn't gotten there yet. And so the reality of people paying in Bitcoin, not really there. And so that would be just doing something for the sake of doing it to get a headline. That's really not what I'm about. I want to make that sustainable change. And so the other option was, how do we give our employees a chance in a controlled environment? Because, I mean, when I started researching, looking into it, having conversations, I mean, depending on where you got your information, it was just so all over the spectrum from, this is the worst thing ever to, this needs to happen right now, and then all in between. And so how do we provide education, a controlled environment, so we're not just saying, hey, employees, go do this. And so we looked at our IRA deferred compensation plan, which is, we pay our employees through a financial advisor and education. They can say we're going to take X number out of our paycheck every 2 weeks, put in a deferred compensation plan, and so let's mirror that with a crypto wallet, and then we can get to a point where we're providing the education, helping them open a wallet if they don't have one, and then talking about the long-term investment, getting away. We don't want them to try to day trade. These aren't penny stocks you're trying to get rich on quickly. Making sound investment, sound fiscal responsible monetary investments for the future. And so we went down that path, opened up a request for proposals, and then we have received those proposals a few weeks ago. Had a conversation with the treasurer's office at the state level, comptroller's office, and getting them involved, because right now, as far as Tennessee goes, we're the first city doing this, first government doing it. So we have to do it right, and we have to do it to where it's beyond reproach. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing stakeholders to the table across the state to make sure that we're doing that correctly, and that we're creating that blueprint for other cities and local governments across the state.
One thing, Scott, that I think you hit on really well is that constantly, I see one of either two things in crypto, which is that we have to get it out there for more people to spend, to go like buy things. And then the other narrative that I constantly see champion is, as I do YouTube in the crypto space and just cover the markets, people are always telling me the latest, greatest project that does X, Y, and Z, some kind of technical overfeat beyond what Bitcoin and some of the core cryptocurrencies are going to be doing. And I think I come back to that point exactly that you mentioned earlier quite eloquently, which is that crypto assets right now, all the while people tend to think that they're attractive because of their short-term volatility. You might be able to trade something and make quick returns. In reality, what makes crypto so great is its finalized supply, having finality or limitations from the supply, programmed to the protocol, and serving as an inflation. And I think that's the clear use case now. And we haven't even, if we're really being honest with ourselves, we haven't even started to scratch the surface of getting the masses, in this case, everyday people in this case, towards investing in cryptocurrencies and benefiting from that hedge. I mean, inflation now is incredibly prevalent right now. I mean, I'm curious, like in Jackson, I think like most parts of the U.S., it's probably hitting people pretty hard right now, even on a local budget level as well for the government.
Yeah, I think you hit on that point of, we want to get it in a usage point, but you got to have the adoption to get there. And I think personally that the mass adoption trend will go local, state, federal, but the regulatory piece will have to come top down. So I think they'll meet in the middle somewhere. Inflation is hitting everything. We're looking at quotes that we got on forest construction projects, road projects, things like that. Those quotes are only good, where it used to be 4, 5, 6 months. Those quotes are good. Now there's like 2 weeks. And so,
oh my gosh, the expired time to those commitments.
The expired time on the quote is only good for
wow.
the 2 weeks. Supply lines are a big issue for us. We ordered 31 police cars last April, and I think this week we'll finally get all of them on the road. So by the time we got them, by the time we equipped them, it took that long. We ordered some heavy-duty trucks, our knuckle boom claw trucks, to pick up bulky waste in July. It'll be May before we get them. And so those things are really putting a delay on what we can do, and then we have to budget for that and plan for that as well and try to lock in prices. So it's a big issue that we're trying to get through for us. And you think you get through one crisis, then you start to get some more financial uncertainty, and it seems like every year so far there's been this great financial uncertainty in our monetary system. And I think the more people can look at looking through the lens of sats as opposed to trying to utilize crypto to get rich in dollars, but looking at the alternative of what the current monetary system is doing, and what the future of the monetary system can do. I think the reality is if the monetary system never evolved, we'd still be trading in seashells.
Yeah.
So to think it's not going to evolve now, not going to continue to evolve, is very short-sighted, I believe.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Scott, is talking about like the history of money. There's really kind of a few key evolutions. If we go back through human history, as you mentioned, you started off with tribal commodity money, which was basically like it could be shells, it could be even useful commodities like salt, all kinds of different things that certain kind of tribes or villages would see as valuable. You then moved towards a consistent form of money, which was gold. It had some limitations. There was refinement that needed to be put in to making gold a form of money in this case. And on top of that, then we moved on towards paper money, IOUs, basically the cash currency we know of today, then electronic money through debit cards to be able to utilize that fiat currency in a new way and expand credit. And now, what we've got is an entirely new system. It's still incredibly new when we're talking about the scale of human history. Really, crypto has only been around for about 11 years to 12 years now. So we've really got to consider like the ramifications of how big this is going to be. And it's almost, as you mentioned, it's almost more costly to not play a role in it than rather it being risky to get involved in cryptocurrencies. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, Scott, because you were talking about this focus on, you went through a variety of different ways to try to get Bitcoin and crypto involved in the government level. You tried your best and stuff. And of course, there's always going to be no's sometimes on being able to do things. But you mentioned this concept of getting paid in crypto. And if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've decided as well to receive some of your portion of your salary in Bitcoin and crypto. So what was maybe that pivotal moment that made you feel comfortable with something that, again, to some people sometimes can sound so dramatic, to make that kind of switch.
Well, I think it's just, being able to show people that it's not, while it does have the short-term volatility, it's the long-term benefit of it, and you have to look beyond, this idea. I think we've got into the instant gratification of things in the long-term investments, long-term horizon. And I had a conversation with someone who was talking about the investment strategy and how the volatility is. And I came in the nonprofit world as well as was my career before here. And when we endowed a trust, it was a 100-year horizon, and they endowed. And so you ask those people, what are your horizons on your current investments? I don't know. I bet they're 100 years or at least 50 years. And so that's what we have to look at. And I think just the showing I was already investing on an average, and so why not do that and take one of my paychecks in Bitcoin, and obviously could not receive it in Bitcoin, had to receive it, then convert it and put it into my wallet, but did that.
Very cool. And may I ask you, Scott, have you thought about doing it more, or like is it something that you receive like on a frequent basis?
Yeah, I mean I DCA now as it is, so.
Very cool. Good stuff, man. No, that's awesome to hear. I mean, honestly, I think it's good. Like, that's the idea is that with the concept of getting paid in crypto, what's so nice is that it's not something like we mentioned, right? The risk of not participating in this kind of new revolution, just like not participating in the web, has a greater cost to it than not participating at all and stuff. And what's nice is that you can have that fractional exposure. You can dollar cost average, get a portion of your payroll. You don't have to go all in. And I think that's, again, as you mentioned, the extremes you find on either end, either incredibly negative or incredibly open and all in on crypto.
Well, I think too, and I've said also this is a great equalizer as far as bridging the wealth gap is a component to that, because 88% of people in the United States have access to a smartphone. Open up a wallet, DCAing, whether it be $1, whether it be $5 a day, a week, whatever, you can start that investment cycle easily. You don't have to go through a broker. You don't have to pay that brokerage fee. And then you can hold it in the wallet, get a cold wallet, get it off the exchange, and just watch it appreciate over time. Just don't do like I do and look at the cost every 10 minutes.
It can drive you nuts sometimes and stuff. You're right there. You always have to remind yourself of that long-term vision. And I like that you hit that point, Scott, and stuff, because I understand it can be like kind of a hot button issue, but like wealth inequality and stuff, I think it's something that people constantly debate about. But to be honest, like the thing is, people usually when they talk about something like wealth inequality, usually thinking tax more, tax less, right? And it's these kind of like I would say kind of governmental solutions of managing certain policies in order to try to solve the issue. But what's interesting about crypto is that it really gets to the root cause of where does the inequality come in the first place, and it's the monetary policy, it's the monetary system. So I think that's a very interesting perspective that you share, and I appreciate the candidness on the checking of the portfolio. I think we're all guilty of it sometimes.
Yeah, if you get a spare minute, just pop it up, look at it, and then for me now, I think what I look at is if I see a red line, I'm thinking, how much can I buy right now?
Exactly.
Without my wife kicking me out.
that should be like a sentiment indicator and stuff, like when the wife's telling you like it's too risky and stuff. It's like, all right, I've got my exposure. But All right, so I wanted to ask you one big question, Scott. Like this is something again because I think we kind of talked a little bit about this with Mayor Suarez back a couple episodes ago, and I'm very interested to get your perspective because you see things on a high level overview serving as mayor in Jackson. You mentioned this idea of Bitcoin and crypto adoption going from local, state, and federal level. When do you think in the United States, on like a federal level, we could see Bitcoin being recognized as legal tender? Will we ever see that? It's a big statement for the U.S. government to go from it being this kind of speculative asset, where the CFTC is calling it a commodity, and other people seeing it as its own currency. What's your take on that?
I think it'll be several election cycles at least. I think you see more candidates, coming out pro Bitcoin, wanting to see legal tender. Um, I'm not as bullish on the legal tender piece of it right now because I think
Mhm.
there's still a lot of opportunity for education. I think adoption is more important than legal tender. Now, some may argue that legal tender will lead to more adoption. Uh, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
somebody way smarter than me going to answer that question. Um, but I think there'll be several election cycles, and it may be that states adopt it first. I think that the regulatory piece will have to be state federal level because at the local level we're governed by state and federal law, and so
Exactly.
any ordinance that we pass, if a state law supersedes it, then we have to follow the state law, the federal law. So that regulatory piece will have to come down. But I think what we can do at the local level is work on that adoption, work on that education, and get more voices and get more people interested, and get more voices talking about it, and then that end puts the pressure bottom up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if there's enough pressure again, like it's this kind of tango that the local and state level have in the United States. And it's great because overall it's led to a lot of great innovation and competition between states to try new things. And that's one of my favorite things. I've gotten to travel the world, but honestly, when I come back to the US, I love the variety that you can get in different types of governance and policies to be able to grow the economy, try new things. And speaking on that, trying new things, one thing, Scott, I think would be interesting to chat about a little bit, again, as you've tried a lot of these efforts to expand the crypto space in your jurisdiction, I'm curious about what kind of projects or initiatives are you looking forward to in the crypto space over the next years? Maybe a bit broad, but like, what kind of things are you looking forward to seeing in this space here that you think will be imperative to getting that kind of mainstream adoption?
Oh gosh, I think for me, and I don't have a full understanding yet, is the blockchain technology ability. I mean, I think that's really for Bitcoin and crypto is one area of it, uh, but that open blockchain technology for especially for governments, local levels, open contracts,
Mm.
smart contracts. I think that's going to once we get a better understanding of it, of how that, for me especially, I say we me, of how that works. Um, I think that provides a much bigger opportunity institutionally for governments than just the monetary piece of digital currency. That technology, you know, see where it is today, imagine where it can be in 10, 15 years on how governments are operating, how businesses are operating with that. Um, I get amazed thinking of the technological advances that we've had in the last 50 years. Like smartphone, I mean, the processor in a smartphone took up an entire warehouse space 50 years ago,
Yeah.
for that computing power. And so I think just if you look at silver linings, which I try to do, and especially the last 2 years, the the forcible advancement of technology that the pandemic has created, I think, really has pushed Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain to the forefront more than it has been, and it has people really looking at how they can utilize that technology. Again, I'm still trying to understand NFTs as well, and so I just think the opportunities keep presenting themselves, and the evolution is so fast that the possibility of where we can be, of what we thought will be in 10 years, will probably be in 2 years, just because the evolution is going so fast now. And it's exciting. It's a little scary, a little apprehensive because I'm trying to catch up. Not my brain is not as young as it was. My kids will catch on probably a lot faster than I will, but I think the opportunities are there and really almost endless. I mean, I joked with somebody a couple of weeks ago. We're in 2022. According to Marty McFly, we're supposed to be having flying cars and doing these things now. So I think we'll get there sooner than later.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. No worries, Scott. If you're stuck on NFTs, I'm in the same boat, man. It's there's like I've been covering the crypto space for the past couple years as my full time job, and I'm like, it's amazing. It's difficult to keep on top of trends, and as you mentioned, I can't think of the label for it, but there is a term that describes like this theory that technology is, especially in software, like specifically. I think as you mentioned, this kind of idea that Marty McFly, like this Back to the Future kind of concept that we're gonna have all these different types of gadgets and everything like that. We might get to that point, but at least we've got this kind of hyperbolic exponential growth in software and the capacity of software due to new innovations in hardware. And it's completely changing the world in ways that I think, again, like even though sometimes to some people it doesn't feel quick enough and it kind of instant gratification generation. I mean, if you look back 10, 20, 30 years ago, the growth is just continuously getting faster and faster. So it's interesting to see someone, again, like in your position, seeing that kind of growth and understand the importance of it.
As far as technology goes, this is, almost seems basic, but we're one of the, I think, the first city we're pioneering, partnering with a Vive. It's called a 4-minute city. And so essentially what we're doing is we're crowdsourcing first responders in Jackson. And so you have a GIS, GPS mapped defibrillator that someone can go through, sign up, go through an hour and a half, 2 hours training, I think is what it is. Someone dials 911 with a heart attack, then in the proximity of where that person is, these defibrillators light up. Someone can respond. They can walk, they can drive over. They're on the phone, somebody in the house on the phone with 911. They're getting somebody show up at your door right now. Knock on the door, and they're showing in, providing the defibrillator, and we're going to save lives and provide a 4-minute response wherever you are in the city of Jackson, just by crowdsourcing first responders.
That's incredible, man. I mean, and honestly, again, that concept has been around. Like, if you think about people doing, I'm blanking on it right now, and stuff like where, let's say, for example, someone's fainted and stuff, and you do. I can't think of the acronym right now. You guys have to breathe and stuff to help them get their air circulating and stuff.
CPR, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. And that I think that's so cool, like to be able to expand that concept into all types of day-to-day services. And I mean, it kind of goes back to that concept of having like a militia, for example, like someone who could stand at the ready and stuff. And being able to do that for civil services in that case is a really fascinating concept and very much in the ethos of cryptocurrency and decentralization. So very fitting as well. Very cool. Scott, I mean, this has been an incredible conversation, man. I'm so excited to see what you guys are doing in Jackson in regards to expanding crypto adoption. Just curious for people who want to keep up with what you're doing, because I really think, like I said, I've been following a couple of different government officials who are pro Bitcoin and crypto, and I really think you're really pushing hard and stuff, especially considering, as you mentioned, like, taking the size of Jackson and stuff, you've been doing a phenomenal job of pushing the envelope for innovation. And for people who want to like maybe continue to follow that, where can they follow that journey and stuff? I know you tweet a little bit and stuff, and then is there some other resources as well?
Yeah, I'm fairly active on social media. Probably when it comes to Bitcoin and the technology piece, Twitter's where it is, because you look at the reading the room, knowing the audience. Facebook isn't as friendly to innovation and technology and forward thinking. I think Mark Zuckerberg's gotten where he wants. His grandparents are on Facebook now, and so you see a little more pushback on things like that. But Twitter, Mayor Conger is a handle, and then Mayor Scott Conger at Instagram, and then also on Facebook. And our website's jacksontn.gov. Check out what we're doing there a little bit. Not as much as I kind of tweet, kind of stream of thought sometimes on what I'm thinking about and where Bitcoin can go and blockchain and technology can take us. We're doing some great things in Jackson. We have a complete OEM EV coming about 35 miles down the road with Ford, investing about $5.6 billion. And so we're looking at how do we continue that and move on into the 21st century and be one of the premier areas in the country.
Very cool, Scott. No, I think you got your head in the right place, man. I think, again, so many cities and towns can be so kind of closed off to innovation. But I think, again, being able to embrace it and stuff, it's going to put Jackson in such a good spot. And that's exactly what you need in a mayor, someone who can see the business innovation in the world and drive it forward. So, Scott, it's been an absolute privilege to get to chat with you, man. Really good perspective on things. And
I've enjoyed it and appreciate the questions and the conversation.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.